Whew, series recap. Stop me if you've heard this before. The Pittsburgh Penguins defeat the Washington Capitals in 7 games. Now, I left this one for last because I think there's the most to unpack from this series. Like, the Oilers lost in 7 games as well, and that was heartbreaking, and there was some controversy to it, but no one is suggesting that Edmonton dismantles the Oilers. With the Capitals, we could be talking about the end of an era in Washington. A team that has been a President's Trophy contender, a Stanley Cup contender for close to 10 years, might be getting torn apart. So in the wake of Washington losing Game 7, which in my opinion was their worst game of the series, and we'll get to that, there was a lot of emotion. I'm sure you've already seen some of the quotes coming out of Washington for locker cleanup. Like, those guys are devastated, talking about how they might not be back, how the team might have been mentally weak. So I went through and looked at the numbers for each game. Not only am I surprised that the Penguins won this series, I'm surprised the Capitals didn't sweep them. Is he serious? Deadly serious. Honestly, if the Penguins and Capitals played this best of 7 series 10 times, the Caps are going to win the next 9. So many things went wrong for the Capitals. They should have won. They did not. These are the Stanley Cup playoffs. If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, then Alex Ovechkin would always have a Srazditsvom. You don't know how many times I had to practice saying that. The Capitals outshot the Penguins by double digits 4 times in this series. Somehow, they lost 3 of them. In 3 different games, the Capitals outshot the Penguins in every single period. The Capitals lost 2 of those games. The Capitals outshot the Penguins in every single game of this 7-game series. And the Capitals lost 4 of those games. This one's my personal favorite when it comes to shots. There were 22 periods of hockey in this series. 21 in regulation plus 1 in overtime. The Capitals outshot the Penguins in 17 of them. Meaning out of 22 periods of hockey, the Penguins only had more shots than the Capitals 5 times. Only 3 of those periods came in the first 6 games. 2 of them came in Game 7. Washington outshoots Pittsburgh 35-21 in Game 1. Lose 3-2. Caps outshoot the Pens 36-24 in Game 2. The Penguins somehow win 6-2. Capitals outshoot the Penguins 33-30 in Game 3. That one was actually tight, and that is one that the Capitals actually won 3-2 in overtime. And then in Game 4, the Capitals outshoot the Penguins 38-19. They actually doubled up the Penguins. The Penguins won 3-2. So the Capitals lost this series, you know that already. Looking at how the first 4 games of the series played out, not only should the Capitals have won this series, they probably should have swept the Penguins. The Penguins didn't have Chris Letang at all this series. Trevor Daley fell out. Sidney Crosby got drilled in the face with a cross-check that may or may not have been intentional or accidental. I'm not going to get into that right now. And the Capitals still lost! Heck, in that game where Sidney Crosby got taken out, the Capitals had a 2-0 lead. Penguins come right back at the end of the 3rd and they tie it up. In a series that the Capitals should have swept, they were somehow almost swept. Steve, enough with the shots. Why are you telling us all about these shots? Enough with your Corsi mumbo jumbo. I'm throwing all these numbers out there because I only know 1 language, but if I knew 20 of them, I would tell you in 20 ways how incredible Marc-Andre Fleury was in this series. Remember past his prime, below league average, cap burden, Vegas fodder, Marc-Andre Fleury? If the Penguins do the thing this year, and they are still 8 wins away from the thing, he's got to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. Like, in a walk. Malkin has been very good, especially in Crosby's absence. Sidney Crosby has been Sidney Crosby, but you don't even consider them. It's Flower. People were talking how much of a bum Alex Ovechkin is. He almost scored a heroic goal in Game 7. But whether he meant to or it was a fluke, that Ovechkin shot goes off of the butt end of Flower's stick. Are you kidding? And what makes Fleury's accomplishment even more spectacular isn't that the Penguins were getting outshot all the time or that the Penguins had tons of injuries. Marc-Andre Fleury was doing this against Braden Holtby, who heading into these playoffs had one of the best save percentages in the playoffs of all time. So many of these cursed cap runs, Braden Holtby has been there. He's been standing on his head. It was the goal scoring that wasn't there. But in this series, dare I say, the Holt beast looked Holt human. So if you're a Capitals fan, or even worse, if you are on the Washington Capitals or work for them, it's impossible to not take this series loss to heart. It's impossible to not be totally, completely disheartened. You won the President's Trophy again. It genuinely looked like your year. You went out and you got the big fish at the trade deadline, Kevin Shattenkirk. You gave it your all, and you should have And then you lost. Again in the second round. Again to Pittsburgh. Capitals fans like, stop turning the knife! Oh, you beat the Leafs. Shut up and let me do this. I'm reading a lot of things. Oh, Ovechkin let his team down again. Well, Nazem Kadri took out his knee pretty early in the playoffs, and he also had a hamstring injury, so high-flying Alex Ovechkin is not exactly going to be the first part. I was seeing people bemoaning poor coaching and personnel decisions by Barry Trotz. They still, on paper, they murdered them! They just lost somehow. Nicholas Backstrom, TJ Oshie, Evgeny Kuznetsov, those players were fantastic offensively. Kevin Shattenkirk was a little bit disappointing, but Nate Schmidt was like found money. I just feel like I'm talking directly to Capitals fans because I want to tell you not to worry. I want to tell you not to feel too bad about it. But the truth of the matter is, due to the salary cap, there are going to be major changes. TJ Oshie, Justin Williams, Daniel Winnick, all UFAs up front. Kevin Shattenkirk and Carl Alsner, UFAs on the back end. Even if you're lucky enough to afford to bring back one or two of those guys. Evgeny Kuznetsov, Andrei Burakovsky, and Brett Connolly are all RFAs up front. Dmitry Orlov and Nate Schmidt need a new deal. And Philip Grubauer, assuming he's not taken by Vegas, also needs a new deal. So big changes in Washington are guaranteed. I will say this though, even though there are big changes, and even though the Capitals may not be as good in the regular season next year, that still could be a playoff team. And as we've seen many times in these playoffs and every playoffs, all you need is a bounce here or there, and you can make it further than the Caps did this year. I just feel bad because there don't really seem to be any answers for Washington after this one. They got robbed. But all credit due to the Pittsburgh Penguins. You weathered the storm. You had to replace players who couldn't play in the lineup due to injury. You had players who were just straight up playing through the injuries. One of those injuries coming into the playoffs, by the way, was Stanley Cup winning goaltender Matt Murray, who was replaced with Stanley Cup winning goalie Marc-Andre Fleury. It's ridiculous. Mike Sullivan has not lost a playoff series as Penguins head coach. And in a series where you could argue that the Penguins were outplayed pretty much the entire time, they saved their best for last. Game 7 was easily their best game of the series. The Caps desperately needed to generate something, anything during the third period of Game 7. And somehow it was the Penguins who outshot them 11-6. And now the Penguins take on the Ottawa Senators in the Eastern Conference Final. Actually kind of interesting, because once upon a time, the Senators were the big dogs on the block, and the young up-and-coming Penguins faced them and got stomped. The next time they faced each other, it was the Penguins who stomped the Senators. And now 3 rounds deep, under obviously different circumstances, they meet again. Now, a lot of people aren't giving the Senators any chance in the third round, and I get it, it's the Pittsburgh Penguins. They were the second seed in the entire NHL, by the way. But like I said, Penguins didn't outshoot the Capitals in a single game. The Penguins have been persevering. The Senators have been persevering. The playoffs can sometimes be a war of attrition. We'll see who survives in round 3. So that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you liked this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. And I'll see you in round 3.